What's up, Anti Report Nation? It's your boy Manny here, and welcome to another edition of the Hoop Report, the NI Women's Basketball Podcast, episode 33. It's polls week, so that means that we're going to get our bi-weekly top 25/receiving votes prediction video out. Obviously, I'm recording this Monday night. Tuesday night, there will be some key games. There'll be some good games to keep an eye on, but none of them should have a direct implication on Wednesday's polls. All games that we play Tuesday night will be towards the following polls that we will get in the new year. And then obviously, when the polls drop on Wednesday, we will try to get our reaction video out on Thursday morning, so that way everybody kind of get a full circle. We're gonna try to. I think we're gonna be able to do it, but that is the plan. That is the goal for the rest of the week. Still wanted to get at least 2 episodes out this week. Not too much conference wise. Again, we do have a few key games on Tuesday, so I'm definitely gonna try and get out another episode this week so that we can kind of wrap up everything for this these couple games that have been going on through Christmas, leading up to Christmas break, I should say. But today's focus is going to be on the top 25, so we will go over a quick recap of them so everybody at home, in case you forgot, because it does feel like it's been a while. Number 1, Dort. Number 2, Bethel. Number 3, Campbellsville. Number 4, Dakota State. Number 5, Marion. 6, 7, 8 is St. Francis, Freed-Hardeman, Briarcliff. 9, 10, 11, 12 is going to be Concordia. It's going to be Lewis and Clark State, Langston, and Mid-American Nazarene. We will stick with those 12 for now, and then we will hop back to the rest of the top 25 as well as receiving votes towards throughout the episode. So, got to address the elephant in the room. Obviously, Dort lost as of these last polls, so they will not be number 1. I do not see them being number 1. Do I think this is the best team in the country? Yes. Do I think they're going to drop that far? I don't know, because for sure we should have a new number 1. Bethel, Campbellsville, I believe, move up 1 and 2. I do think Dort has to at least drop to number 3. That is the minimum, because Bethel and Campbellsville still both undefeated. I could see Dort. Now this is when I say worst case scenario, this is most unlikely. I'm not gonna say worst case scenario, but most unlikely is Dort going 4-5, only because Dakota State and Marion still undefeated, and since the last polls, they do have ranked wins under their belt. Granted, obviously, as far as they're concerned, it's always under them, but they still have ranked wins. Dort did lose to an unranked team in their own conference. I could see the committee maybe making a example almost of Dort and dropping them 4-5. I don't think so. I think 3 is where they're going to end up, but I do got to do my due diligence of possibly saying 4-5 could be a possibility. St. Francis, I believe they dropped to number 8 after getting upset by number 19, IWU. I just feel like Indiana Wesleyan, while they have been having a up and down season, they're still Indiana Wesleyan. You still lost to number 19 team in the country, even though it was on the road and whatnot. Now, you did get a good bounce back game against Southeastern this past weekend, which I do think helps keep them in the top 10, but I don't think they're going to hold on to that number 6 spot. They got to drop down a little bit, especially because Freed-Hardeman, still undefeated, one of the best teams in the country. I think that's going to bump them up to 6. I do have Briarcliff being my first team outside the top 10. Why? 2-3 since their last polls, and 2 of those losses were upsets. Number 14, Dakota Wesleyan, and unranked Morningside. Got to dock you a couple points for those. Now, I do remember that last time these polls came out, and the little paragraphs that all the top 10 teams get, they mentioned the Briarcliff Dakota Wesleyan game in that. If the committee is going off of that and strictly is putting that game into the last polls, then maybe Briarcliff stays in the top 10. But for the way I'm doing it, I'm counting, again, anything that happens Tuesday night does not count towards the poll that will come out Wednesday morning. That's what happened. The last time that those 2 teams played was a Tuesday night game, so it should not have counted towards the polls that next Wednesday morning, and that's what I'm going off of. So that's why I'm saying that they should fall out of the top 10, because you have 2 upset losses, and one of them being an unranked loss that I do think should hurt a little bit and put you at the top 10. I also have Concordia staying in the top 10 between 9 and 10. I don't know if they're going to be able to move up, but I do like their chances. They're 3-2 since the last polls, but they were upset by Dakota Wesleyan in their own case, who I do believe will have probably one of the biggest jumps in these polls. And the other loss was to number 1 Dort. Might as well not been a loss in my opinion. Lewis and Clark, Langston, Mid-American Nazarene, Rio Grande, and Dakota Wesleyan, biggest question marks in these polls. That's why I kind of wanted to cut it off at 12, and Rio Grande's 13, so we'll slot them in there. I know I didn't show them on the graphic there, but they are number 13 in as of the last polls. We'll go down each one, kind of going from most likely to drop to least likely. Lewis and Clark State, you went 3-2 since your last polls. You got upset by number 16 Carroll and by receiving votes Eastern Oregon, who's still undefeated. You beat number 15 Rocky Mountain. It was a neutral site game. My gut feeling is you're going to drop possibly 2 spots. I do think you can drop 2 spots. I do think that's what I'm looking at. I'm looking at you being in that 12 range. Maybe, because, and we'll talk about MNU in a minute here, maybe 13. But that's the farthest I would go. I just feel like you getting upset by 2 teams below you, even though you beat Rocky Mountain, if you win one of those 2 games against Carroll or Eastern Oregon, I think you're safe. I think you're a lock to be, maybe not a lock to be top 10, but at least 11, 12. I'm more comfortable in that. But I do think 13 now is in play with you losing both of those games, especially in the fashions that they were. For Langston, they're 4-2 since their last polls. Both losses were upsets, though. They lost to receiving votes Mid-American Christian and unranked USAO. It's going to dock you a couple points. I see them dropping at least one spot. The other problem is, and that's why I feel like Lewis and Clark State, Langston, and Mid-American Nazarene specifically are such an interesting group, because for Mid-American Nazarene, if they would have won this past weekend against Grandview, you move up. Hands down. Easy. But you're 3-1, that one being that loss to Grandview this past weekend, who's receiving votes right now. My gut feeling is you're going to stay 12 because that's what you've been the entire season. I also feel like everybody around you in that little cluster that I'm talking about, with 10, 11, and 12, just hasn't done enough, or didn't do enough to stay, specifically 10 and 11, to stay where they are. I could see them still moving up, though, because the Grandview loss was an overtime game. Grandview, I believe, could be in the top 25 now, or should be in the top 25 now, in my opinion. So it might not be the worst loss. I do think they had the least hurting loss, I guess. I don't even know how I'm trying to say. But basically, their loss, the one loss that they had, was the one out of these 3 teams that will not affect them that much, that I think will be fine. They'll be able to get away with it for 1 week. But then the other part of this, too, is Rio Grande, who is 3-1. Their only loss was number 4, Marion. It was a pretty competitive game up until the second half, really, and Marion's one of the best defenses in the country right now. My gut feeling is they're going to move up over all 3 of these teams. I think you're looking at Rio Grande being top 10. I really do. Because, in a world, this would be my order out of these 4 teams. I'm going Rio Grande 10. I'm going Mid-American Nazarene 11. I would go Langston 12 and then Lewis and Clark State 13. That's my gut feeling. That's my kind of, I know I don't really put numbers to a lot of these because there's so many things that can go. I just kind of more talk about who's going up, who's going down. But with these specific 4, I feel pretty confident in putting that out there, just on the strength of Lewis and Clark getting upset twice by teams a few knots down. The only ranked win you get is number 15, so it's not like it's top 10 or even a top 15. It's number 15 exactly. Then Langston, you get upset twice. Again, teams below you. At least those losses. And the other part of it, too, is for Langston, I think they've had a better year up to this point than Lewis and Clark State. I think Lewis and Clark State has dropped a few top 25 matchups already, which is also going to hurt them, I feel like. And then for Mid-American Nazarene, you've had a good enough year to where we can overlook one weekend. Kind of like think back to Lindsey Wilson earlier this year, where they dropped some unranked games right before the polls came out and they stayed at 24. I think the same thing could happen here. Maybe moving up because everybody around you did worse than you did from a record-wise within the last week, 2 weeks or so. And then Rio Grande, like I mentioned, they should be top 10 just because of the strength of the season so far and what they've been doing. And the only loss of the season being the number 4 team in the country, who could be number 3 next polls. So I do feel like that's a pretty confident order. Now we go to the next batch of teams. We're going, mentioned obviously number 12, Mid-American Nazarene, but number 13, Rio Grande. We already touched on those 2. Dakota Wesleyan, number 14, Rocky Mountain, Carroll, St. Francis of Illinois, 15, 16, 17, Cumberland of Kentucky, Indiana Wesleyan, Indiana Tech, 18, 19, 20, Oregon Tech, Corbin, Southeastern, Georgetown, and Montana Tech are number 20s through 25. Obviously, Southeastern and Georgetown at the bottom there are tied in that category for number 23. Now, this bracket, this part of this cluster of the top 25, another interesting one, I will say, because we'll start with Dakota Wesleyan. They're my easiest decision of the entire top 25. They're moving up. Yes, they're 3-2, but hear me out. Both losses were to number 1 and number 4, respectfully. What are we going to do about that? I don't think there's a problem with that. I don't think anybody has any issues with that. Big win over number 9 Concordia, who I believe at the time was undefeated. That alone bumps them up one spot. So now you're at 13. Now you're sitting at 13. But because I've mentioned how Mid-American Nazarene, Langston, and Lewis and Clark State hadn't had the greatest 2 weeks, and I have Rio Grande being number 10, don't be surprised if Dakota Wesleyan jumps up to 14. I talked about the 4 clusters in a vacuum. I mentioned, for me, 10 to 13 should be in the next polls, Rio Grande, Mid-American Nazarene, Langston, Lewis, and Clark State. That's what I said. Now, if I add in Dakota Wesleyan into that mix, what I would go is Rio Grande, Dakota Wesleyan, Langston, Mid-American Nazarene, Lewis, and Clark State. Flip the Mid-American Nazarene and Langston. All right, that's the order I would go. Adding Dakota Wesleyan. I do believe Dakota Wesleyan and Rio Grande should be on the edge of top 10 because of the 2 weeks you just had. Remember, top 25 is a power ranking sort of thing. So just because Dordt won't be the number 1 team in the country, from a ranking wise, does not mean they're the number 1 team in the country. They're not the number 1 team in the country. I think everybody rightfully will still say they are the number 1 team in the country. So this goes off of the last 2 weeks. How have you fared from that standpoint? Some teams had a really good weekend. Some 2 weeks. Some teams didn't. That's just how it works. But I do believe Dakota Wesleyan has done enough to get on the edge of top 10. I don't think they should be in the top 10 because you still did lose 2 times. While who you lost to helps still move you up because they're really quality opponents, you still lost twice. So I can't give you top 10 just yet. Maybe in the next polls we can talk about that then. Now we're going to head over to Rocky Mountain. Rocky Mountain and Carroll, they're my 2 that I'm probably most confident in saying that they'll drop 2. Rocky Mountain, 4-2 since the last polls. A nice win over number 21, Oregon Tech. Solid win. Not an upset win, but a solid win nonetheless. Then you get upset in bad fashion versus Montana Tech, who's number 25. Obviously, we talked about it at length on the podcast with Maya. 4-point quarter to a 25-point quarter for Montana Tech. We don't got to go over that again, but it was a really bad loss. You did avenge an early season loss to Bismarck State, which I do think should account for something. And then you lost number 10, Lewis and Clark State. So your 2 losses were to 2 ranked teams, one being under you by 10 spots, the other being ahead of you by 5. Your only ranked win was a team that's below you in the rankings. And the only notable other win was an avenging win against Bismarck State. I would give you dropping 1 spot. I'd put you around the 16, maybe 17 range. Carroll, 4-2, great win over number 10, Lewis and Clark State. But getting upset by number 21, Oregon Tech, it hurts. Because if you win that game, I'm comfortably putting you in the top 15, right behind maybe Dakota Wesleyan, because I think you would have had a better 2 weeks than with the 2 teams we talked about before. We talked about Langston, we talked about Lewis and Clark State, and probably even Mid-American Nazarene I throw in there too. But because you lose that Oregon Tech game, it kind of cancels out, in my opinion, the Lewis and Clark win. And then you add in that you get upset by number 25, Montana Tech. That what keeps you at 16. I think you stay at 16. I'm more concerned about them dropping than I am Rocky Mountain. Why? You lost. Actually, no, I'm more concerned about Rocky Mountain because you lost to a team that is 10 spots below you in the rankings. I do think that has to matter a little bit. Right? So I think Carroll drops. If anything, I'd switch it. I'd probably say Rocky Mountain, you're looking at 2 spots. And then Carroll, I think, stays. I don't see them moving up, but I think they could stay at 16. Then we got St. Francis. And this is the other reason that I definitely have both those two teams dropping in Carroll and Rocky Mountain. St. Francis is still undefeated. They're a top 15 team in the country. We got to stop beating around the bush about it. They are top 15. Give me number 15. That's fine. I'll take it. But they should be in the top 15 when these polls come out Wednesday morning. 12-0 on the season. They have a receiving votes win over St. Xavier. Every game has been a blowout. What more do you need for them? They should be number 15. Enough said. Cumberlands of Kentucky. They did enough to stay in the top 20, I feel like. Again, their number exactly is 19. So that's why I feel like they could still be in. They should still be in there. Could move up 17, 16, depending on what the Raiders and everybody kind of look at from around them. 3-0 with a win over receiving votes Shawnee State, who now has a win over Southeastern, who's number 23 at the time right now. I think that helps your case. I think that helps your case of another example where a lot of these teams, sometimes you just got to do what's in front. Do your job. And your job is to win basketball games. You win basketball games like Cumberland of Kentucky has done. 3-0. Great win over receiving votes. Shawnee State, who, again, maybe in a vacuum, you're like, oh, they should have won that game. Yeah, but this is the same team that just beat a ranked number 23 team. So really helps your case there. Now you're looking at it because everybody around you started getting upset and whatnot. You're looking at a much better chance of you moving up in the standings and moving up in the rankings. So I think Cumberland of Kentucky should stay top 20. Don't see them dropping backwards. At least staying number 19. If not, you could move up depending on how much the committee is going to penalize a Rocky Mountain and a Carroll for the up and down weeks that they had. Indiana Wesleyan, I think they stay at number 19. I think they stay at number 19. Cumberland of Kentucky was 18. I think they stay number 19 for the Wildcats. 2-1 since the last polls. 1-1 technically because the second one was a forfeit. A great win over number 6 St. Francis. Handing them their first loss of the season. That deserves a solid round of applause. Really big win. But then you get upset by receiving votes Huntington, which has been the biggest Achilles heel for them all year, really. They do have some key games coming up here pretty soon that I think will be very important. But I think as of Wednesday morning, they will stay number 19 just because that number 6 win, added with the fact that it's St. Francis' first loss of the season, holds a little bit of weight. And now if St. Francis would have lost to Southeastern this past weekend, I don't know how much weight it then holds. But given the fact that they were able to come out with a nice win, that receiving of Huntington loss really does bug me, though. And my gut feeling is saying that the committee is going to penalize Indiana Wesleyan more than I think, because now you look at their schedule, they're 6-5, not a great record. Granted, number 2 is in there twice, I think it is. Number 3 is in there. Like, I get that, but those are the games you schedule. You got to judge you off of those games. Indiana Tech could be outside the top 20. Why? You got upset by unranked Rochester Christian. Nothing else really. And the way that game happened too, tough call, was a foul. I will say that. I do think it was a foul. But I mean, you can't afford those. You can't afford those to be in those situations. And that's what a lot of times people are going to say. Don't even be in that situation for the referee to make that call. Don't even be in a situation for that call to affect the outcome of the game. But I do think they'll probably be outside the top 20. They were 3-1 overall. No ranked wins to compensate for that unranked loss. It's going to be a tough one. Oregon Tech, I think they sneak into the top 20, kind of taking Indiana Wesleyan's spot. I'm looking at their win over number 16 Carroll. And the only loss since the last poll has been number 15 Rocky Mountain. Another one, you lost. You basically went 1-1 with teams above you, and those two teams did not have a great 2 weeks. So how do you weigh that? Up to you, to the committee to decide. I will say, if I beat a team that just beat a number 10 team in the country, my resume should look a little nicer for that. So I think they get number 20 specifically. Corbin, undefeated as far as I'm concerned, 9-0. No ranked games, but could move up a spot or two. Can't really touch too much on them because, again, they haven't played any ranked teams, so I don't know from that standpoint how the committee will look at it. But when you're undefeated, you're undefeated. As far as I'm concerned, you're still undefeated, so you gotta move it up. Or not undefeated, but undefeated in the last 2 weeks for these polls. Southeastern, you're in jeopardy of falling out altogether. Altogether in jeopardy of falling out. Why? You dropped to receiving vote Shawnee State and number 6 St. Francis. If you win that St. Francis game, which they had a very good chance of doing, I think you're safe of being still in top 25. You could still drop, but I don't think now we're talking about them possibly falling out because there are some receiving votes teams. I have it right here in my notes. Don't be surprised if a lot of teams drop out of the top 25. We look at the last polls. We had 1, 2, 3 teams drop out of the top 25. I can see that number. At least that number is going to happen again, if not more. Don't be surprised. Southeast is one of those teams kind of on the bubble. They are on the bubble. Georgetown, I think they move up. Perfect season so far, 13-0. Again, when you're undefeated, I don't want to hear anything about not being in the top 25. You haven't lost a game yet. You played 13 times, you haven't lost. I don't care who you've played. I don't care what your strength schedule is. I don't care. This is the rankings right now. And right now, you are one of the top teams in the country because you're still one of the undefeated teams left. Now, do I think just because you're 13-0, you should be top 15? No. But you should still stay top 25. Do I want to give you? I think you could be top 25 looking at 21-22 specifically. 21-22 specifically. Montana Tech is on jump watch. They're the highest team that could jump these polls. 5-game winning streak. You have wins over 15 and 16 and dominant wins otherwise, aside from those two. I'm looking at a range of 18, 19. I really do. I think they can jump in there. I think if they don't give it to Oregon Tech, they could give it to Montana Tech. I think they've had a better week than a lot of these teams that I'm talking about. They had a better week than Indiana Tech. They had a better week than Indiana Wesleyan. They had a better week than Carroll and Rocky Mountain. I mean, you beat those two teams. So I think off that strength alone, you should not be on the bubble of dropping out anymore. I think you should be solidified in the top 20. They are the team to watch for on the jump watch, for sure. Now we're going to head over to, and I don't think I showed those, so let me show the graphic real quick for the receiving votes side of things. William Carey, Hastings, Loyola, Lindsey Wilson, Columbia, Evangel, Huntington, Shawnee State, Friends, Governor State, Northwestern, Mid-American Christian, Southern Oregon, Grandview, Taylor, Montana State, Northern, Eastern Oregon, LSU Shreveport, Providence, St. Xavier, Spring Arbor, Faulkner, and College of Idaho. Now, like I mentioned, do not be surprised if there's a lot of teams that jump out and a lot of teams that come in. Why? I'm looking specifically at these teams that I think should move in. They should move in. I'm going to go in order from yes to maybe. Yes, William Carey, undefeated. I just talked about it. If you're undefeated in my book, you got to be in the top 25, especially at this point of the year. I'm pretty sure that at the end of this, looking at this, not Door anymore. Bethel, Campbellsville, Marion, St. Francis, Fried Hardeman, St. Francis of Illinois. Those are the only teams undefeated right now that are in the top 25, and they're on the top 25. Again, that's just off the top of my head looking at the rankings. There might be another team out there. Apologies if you are. But from the standpoint of these specific teams that I'm talking about, William Carey should be in there. They've proven it. They are more than capable of being a top 25 team. Now, highest 24, 23. I think that's safe. Yes, Columbia. It's time. It's time. Undefeated. They have a receiving votes win under their belt in dominant fashion. You got to give them that number as well. Looking at number 23 maybe. Evangel. It's time. Undefeated. Top offensive, one of the top offenses in the country. They're on a 4-game streak of at least 100 points. They've done that 5 times this year. Their defense is stout. Their offense is immaculate. I just had Coach Wallace on, and we talked a lot about that and talked about a lot of her key players. They deserve to be in the top 25. Give me 25. I don't care, but they need to be in the top 25. The other team that I'm looking at that is a maybe, which I hate to say, Eastern Oregon. Undefeated. Give me it. Upset win over number 10, Lewis and Clark State. And as I'm saying that, I'm going to have to double back. And Evangel's the team that I'm looking at as being a maybe. Because Lewis and Clark has Eastern Oregon has that ranked win under their belt right now. That's the only reason why. Unless the committee looks at what Evangel's been doing in the KCAC in terms of just handling business, being the clear team to beat, I don't think Eastern Oregon's been the same thing for the Cascades, so I really think Eastern Oregon will get that final nod of getting it in. Going off of last polls where 3 teams came out, 3 teams came out, 3 teams came in, I think those are the 3 teams I'm looking at. William Carey, Columbia, and Evangel. And Eastern Oregon. Evangel would be that 4th team that I think has a real case. They got a real case to do it. I would pull the trigger on it. I would pull the trigger, add some spice to these next polls. Enough to stay up top in the receiving votes. I got Hastings. You beat a receiving votes team, and your only loss was to Briarcliff. Understandable. Loyola, undefeated since the last polls, but no ranked games, so I don't think that you can get in the top 25 again just yet. Lindsey Wilson, undefeated since the last polls, but again, no ranked games either, so I do think that hurts the possibility of getting back up. I think Hastings, it was William Carey, Hastings, Loyola, and Lindsey Wilson who had the top 3 votes last time. I think William Carey goes up, so now you move Hastings up, you move Loyola up, and you move Lindsey Wilson up, especially because Columbia could go in. Evangel will probably be my next team actually in there. So give me Evangel, Hastings, Loyola, Lindsey Wilson, that order for the top 4 in receiving votes. Now we're going to talk about enough to move up closer to the top of the receiving votes. Grandview, undefeated, upset number 12, Mid-American Nazarene for their first loss of the season. You gotta get a little bit of recognition for that one. So that would probably be my 5th team. To round it out. For context, William Carey, who was number 1, had 77 votes. Then Hastings was 66, Loyola was 66, Lindsey Wilson 51, Columbia 39, and then Evangel 24. Those were your top 5. I think Grandview should get more than Evangel. I'm looking at the Columbia Lindsey Wilson range at 51 to 39. Huntington, you upset IWU, and then you beat receiving vote St. Xavier. You've done enough to move up. You were number 6, so you move up a little bit. I think that's a fair assumption to make. Shawnee State, big upset over number 23 Southeastern for handing them their first loss of the season. You were towards the bottom. Where are you? Yeah, actually, you weren't towards the bottom. You were right next to Huntington. You were 16, though. I think you get over 20 votes this time because that was a really, really solid win. Granted, it was a neutral site. Don't care. That was a good win. Then we also have Mid-America Christian, who beat number 11 Langston. Big win. Big win. You had the least amount of votes out of this group that I'm talking about right now at 11. Give me that Shawnee State range of 16 from the last polls. Could you get up to 20? That'd be a little interesting, but I'd like to see that. But I think 16 is a fair number to get. Enough to stay in the receiving votes picture. Southern Oregon, not a bad week. Just not enough to really move up, in my opinion, right now. Northwestern, not enough to stay, but not enough to drop out either. They're just kind of in that middle range, so I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. Taylor, undefeated since the last polls versus unranked teams. You did what you're supposed to do. I think you should be rewarded by staying where you're at. MSU Northern, 4-1 since the last polls, but the loss was to number 4 Dakota State. Not going to penalize you for that one. You handle business where you're supposed to handle business. LSU Shreveport, undefeated against unranked teams. Same thing as Taylor. You do what you're supposed to do. I think you should be rewarded by being where you're at right now. If you want to move up a little bit, I get that too. Providence, 4-1 since the last polls. Only loss was against Dakota State. As you can see, Dakota State is racking up some nice wins. And then Spring Arbor, 3-0 versus unranked teams as well. Handle business. Get rewarded by being where you're at. So I think that's a safe assumption to make. The dropouts, or the drop downs, as in not out, but just towards the bottom of the receiving votes picture. I'm looking at Faulkner. I don't think you did enough to stay in it. You lost to some unranked teams. I think that could hurt you a little bit here. And Friends as well. For Faulkner, they lost to unranked Southern, UT Southern, and then number 2 Bethel. Not really the Bethel game, but it's the UT Southern game that I think, and especially because I don't know how the committee's gonna look at it, but I know it's hard to beat multiple teams twice, especially in your own conference. I get that. But you already beat UT Southern once. You got to get them again. And you got to get them again because now you're looking at it like, oh, you're 1-1 against this team. Which game are we really going to look at? For Friends, I just don't think you did enough to stay. You're not having a bad run, but it's getting tough. And the only thing that could save them is that Evangel game, which is coming up pretty soon. I don't think it's anytime around the corner, though. So we'll see. But other than that, unless a Sterling gets a receiving votes next to their name, which I could see it. They've been having a really good run here in the KCAC, and overall, I think it's hurting you right now, and so you're just not the team to beat in the KCAC, and that's the situation we're in right now. Teams that I think will fall out. Don't know how many teams fell out last time, obviously, but I got St. Xavier falling out. 2-2 since the last polls. You lost to number 17 St. Francis. Not a bad loss. Then you lose to receiving votes Huntington. That one's I think, the one that docks you enough to get out. Governor State, 2-3 since the last polls versus unranked teams. You got to drop out. I know that last polls you were so Shawnee State was 7. Friends was 8. Governor State's at 9 with 14 votes. At least cut that in half. And I'm being generous. Might be outside altogether. Be honest with you guys. 2-3 versus unranked teams. There gotta be some kind of penalty for that. In College of Idaho, you lost to number 10 Lewis and Clark State. Is it a bad loss? No, but I think there's some teams that are outside looking in that really have a case here. So I think that's where the issue lies. You only had 2 votes last time, so you barely made the cut. Could you get a few more? Possibly, but we'll have to see about that. Teams that I look at possibly going in, UT Southern with that win over Faulkner, and they've already had some good wins in the past few weeks as well. You beat Lindsey Wilson, you beat a Cummins of Tennessee. These are solid wins that are starting to stack up. So now the committee's got to look at it like, hey, they didn't do it once, they didn't do it twice. They did it 3 times. We might have to give them at least an RV next to their name these next polls. Then College of the Ozarks, who beat Mid-American Christian, who obviously won against number 11 Langston. We're playing that domino effect here. I'm trying to stay as much out of that as possible, especially when it comes to the rankings, because it doesn't really affect it too much. It's more about the brackets and all that kind of stuff, which for the record, I am working on that. But I think those 2 teams, I think I'm also looking at probably, like I said, a Sterling. You're undefeated in the KCAC. I know you haven't played Evangel just yet, but when you're dominant, you're dominant. And we've got a really good team like they do. You got to let it. You got to give them a little bit of reward here. If you're going to give College of Idaho 2 votes and get them in, I think Sterling could do that. 2 votes perfectly within the realm of possibility for them. So that's kind of where I'm at with that. But that's going to do it for the prediction side of things. Like I mentioned, there's not too many games going on the rest of the week here, just because, a lot of teams are kind of starting on their Christmas break. I will pull up the schedule for unranked, for non-conference games, because there are a lot of those. For Tuesday, meaning tonight when you guys are watching this, few games I'm looking at: Morningside versus Thomas, kind of an under-the-radar game there to keep an eye on. I think those are two very good teams that have kind of turned the corner a little bit this season. Bruton Parker versus Southeastern, a rematch from earlier this year. This time it's going to be at Southeastern. You've also got William Carey versus Georgetown, locked in for that one. That's going to be a great game. That's going to be at 3 p.m. Eastern time. Receiving votes team versus another top 25 team. Again, that game should not count towards the rankings. So if William Carey comes in with the upset, that's great. That's cool. Won't help them for these polls. The next polls, though, big time. Then we've got also Bethel versus Faulkner, second time this season. Bethel, Kansas, from Kansas, versus Missouri Valley. I think that's a great non-ranked matchup to keep an eye on. Just really two really good teams. They're going to be playing some good basketball there. Grandview versus Freed Hardeman. Grandview's got a tough 2 games coming up here. They've got Freed Hardeman and Bethel back-to-back. It's going to be a tough one. If they can get one of those, hey, Grandview cooking right now. Also got Mobile at UT Southern. And to round it off, got USAO versus Mid-American Christian. I think that's going to be a very good game as well. I talked about it. We will try and have a reactions episode to the polls. Might not be that quick. And to be honest, it just depends on what the polls do. I would like to say that, I'm going to react to it. But if it goes kind of what I expect, I don't really see a reason to react to it. So that's why I will always want to have the prediction ones out, because in case there's nothing to really talk about from a poll standpoint, I want to make sure you guys get those 2 episodes. Even though there are back-to-back Monday and Tuesday, only do that once every 2 weeks. I think that's a fair trade-off there. I do have some coaches interviews lined up, like I've said in the last episode, or we've talked about throughout these coming weeks here with Christmas break. Going to try and spend some time with family, with friends, all that good stuff. But that's going to do it for this episode of the Hoop Report. Kind of a shorter episode than just talking about top 25s and the predictions. Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe, and we will catch y'all in the next one. Peace.